Dr. Corsi, we've got a very special episode of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America today. How are you, Doctor?
I'm doing just fine. Doing great to be with you and looking forward to this very much.
Yep. Okay, there we go, back to the main camera. The reason, Doctor, today's show is special is because normally Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America is a subscriber-only program that people can access by sponsoring your Patreon channel at patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, or by sponsoring Crowdsource the Truth at patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth and subscribestar.com/Crowdsource the Truth. But we wanted as many people as possible to become familiar with the show and to get to see it, to share it with their friends and family and let them know that you and I have just started this program. And so hopefully people will share this with their friends on Twitter and Facebook and Parler and Gab and Minds.com, and we can help grow the audience.
I think it's a great idea. We'll be doing some broadcasting on the YouTube channel. I'm still very suspicious that YouTube is not going to be a friendly platform. And Patreon is where I think we'll be regularly archiving and posting new shows. I have gotten rid of most of the old videos on both YouTube and Patreon, all the ones from before, when Mueller knocked on my door a year ago on August 28th, and of course now, that was 2018, and now we're free of Mueller, and no investigations are continuing, and so I was not indicted despite their threat to indict me, and I feel like I was vindicated in that Mueller ended without bringing any indictment against me. And I'm beginning gradually, it took us a while to recover. I mean, this was a very, very tough experience for us, my wife and my family and I wrote a book, This Silent No More, which expresses all that and kind of gave you day by day as I was going through this how it felt to be under Mueller's examination. And I'm convinced that it was a corrupt investigation and that, in fact, it was out only to look for evidence that could lead to the impeachment of Donald Trump. And that their final plea deal, which they wanted me to plead to my first day's testimony, which Mueller had allowed me to amend, I thought was fraudulent. And if the deal they gave me to read, so as to avoid being indicted, this plea deal was equivalent to, I think, Rudy Giuliani's correct suborning perjury on my behalf. They were trying to get me to plead to a crime I didn't commit. I told them I wouldn't do it. And we weren't indicted. So that's now done, and I think we're beginning to get back. One more thing, just to let everybody know, I've just finished a new book, and I did the copy editing over the holiday, finished it up. It's called Coup d'etat, exposing the deep state traitors, the deep state treason, and the plan to re-elect President Trump. And that will be out. It's listed as being out on Amazon. It's up on Amazon right now. It's listed as being available in January. We're actually going to try to get the book out in December. And that's, I think, going to be another explosive book that really does show chapter and verse how this was a coup d'etat, an attempt to deny Donald Trump the presidency and to oust him from the White House despite having won a legitimate election and won fair and square according to the Constitution. So that book, I think, is going to be really important, too. And, Jason, we're going to continue these weekly chats. I think I'll be able to do some additional work as creating issues, and I'm probably going to do a few more ebooks this year and audio books. I'm not reporting. I never did get back a permanent reporting job, so my monthly income never returned after Mueller. But I'm really focusing now on doing 100% of my time writing.
Well, Doctor, I can say that on the brighter side, never is not over yet, so perhaps those opportunities will return. And I also want to let fans of Corsi Nation know that when we do these broadcasts on YouTube, which normally we're going to do them, normally we'll be doing them on Patreon and Subscribestar, but when they do happen on YouTube, we've got a simulcast happening as we do today. People can go over to your YouTube channel, which they can just find the URL there by going to YouTube and searching for Jerome Corsi. The benefit to watching on Dr. Corsi's channel is that fans of Corsi Nation can support the doctor through Super Chat. And that is, of course, available on the Jerome Corsi YouTube channel. People can also visit CorsiNation.com. That's Dr. Corsi's free webpage, and you can help support the doctor and his fight against the deep state by clicking on the donate button right there. And doctor, that brings me to the first story we want to talk about. I think everyone who's tuning into Corsi Nation and Crowdsource the Truth is extremely pleased that you avoided indictment, but the question now is, are they going to indict anybody, doctor?
Well, that's, I think, the subject today in terms of, this deep state never sleeps, and will Barr indict anyone? The recent report from Barr, which appeared just before Labor Day, which was on James Comey and the issues of these memos that Comey wrote to himself, I think, first of all, was for most people disappointing in that, again, Barr excused Comey and said that no crime was committed, although I think the report was written to make it clear that Comey was fired appropriately. In other words, the report was really his dishonorable discharge, if you want to put that into military terms. And I'm having a little trouble today with the camera. The camera's going funky in and out, but we'll keep going and we'll make it work eventually. Hopefully it will stabilize.
Yep.
I haven't used it for a while, and now that we're using it again, it seems like it may have a problem. We'll have to figure it out. At any rate,
sure.
The question here for me is now what's going to happen next? And I've been debating that, the way you read this report on Comey, it could be that what Mueller is saying is that while these memos that Comey wrote, especially the one that he allowed his lawyer to see with the intention of getting it to the press in order to create a special prosecutor, that did not contain any classified information. And that seemed to be the escape hatch that Barr said, well, we won't prosecute Comey because he didn't release classified information.
Right.
Now, when that came out, I said last week, basically, I think it sets Comey up for the next report on abuse of the FISA, in which I think Comey and others, if Barr concludes that the FISA court applications the Department of Justice made on Carter Page were illegal, then I think Comey and others will be recommended for prosecution and will have to be indicted. Now, my analogy was with the memos, it could be like somebody, first of all, I think all crimes should be prosecuted. I think that report was let Comey off the hook. But I read it like Comey had jaywalked, crossing the street, he stabbed and killed someone, and they wanted to prosecute him for the murder. So very possibly it's a setup where Comey is going to still be subject to criminal prosecution because the FISA court applications were, I believe, illegal. And I want to discuss why I think that today and have you question me about it. But I think that's the real issue here is Barr deep state, or will Barr actually do his job and recommend indictments? And it's an important question because the ability of the American people to trust the justice system, I think, is going to depend upon there being indictments. If there's not indictments, I don't think the American people are going to trust the justice system ever again. I think it's that simple.
Yep. I agree with you, Doctor.
And, let me explain why I think that the FISA court was illegal in the way they applied for it. And there's a picture of Barr and the Bushes. Barr's got a long history here, and he could easily be considered to be a Washington insider. And the concern is that bureaucracies, Washington bureaucracies, tend to circle the wagons. They protect all the people who are in the bureaucracy and excuse them They may say they did wrong, but they're not going to try to prosecute them because they don't want to damage the Department of Justice or the FBI. People within these agencies still support Hillary Clinton, still want to get a pass for all the Comey and I think all the people, Brennan, Clapper, there's a whole list within and out of the CIA and within the Department of Justice and the FBI who participated in this coup d'etat. And the question is whether they will all excuse each other and maybe a few people get fired, but try to sweep this under the rug. And I think that the nature of crimes committed here are such a magnitude that the people have got to be indicted. And Barr will not do his job unless this next report, my litmus test, this next report has got to say in clear terms that the FISA court applications were illegal. If Barr does not conclude that, then I'm going to conclude that Barr is part of the cover-up, and he is part of the deep state, and his job is really to smooth all this over. Now, I'm hoping and praying that that's not the case.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Carter Page. And, this, again, I write about extensively in my forthcoming book, Coup d'etat, and I explain how, they really do want to expose these deep state traitors. And I really do want to make it clear that Donald Trump will be reelected. Again, at the very start of this, I want to say I think there's going to be 3 phases. Number 1, and I wrote this in Killing the Deep State, 2017. Number 1, that Mueller would fail. Well, Mueller didn't knock on my door with the FBI until months after that book was published, and the FBI showed up at my home on August 28th, 2018. By then, Killing the Deep State was already a New York Times bestseller, and I had predicted in writing that book in 2017 that Mueller would fail. There would be no Russian conspiracy, no Russian collusion, and no obstruction. Now,
and
that's
the book
happened.
is very, very well reviewed, Doctor. Almost 2,000 reviews, overwhelmingly 5-star.
Well, I'm very pleased with that book. I think that book was I think the current book, this Coup d'etat is my best book, most important I've ever written. But The Killing of Deep State, I think, was very well written. The Coup d'etat is really a sequel. Okay, now I'm saying that there's 2 more phases to come. The second phase is what I call the Trump counterattack. And the Trump counterattack, what I'm predicting is that there will be indictments, and that there have to be indictments. If Barr doesn't do his job, then we're going to need a special prosecutor. Much as I dislike special prosecutors, these traitors have to be brought to justice. I say the second phase will take all the way up until the election. So that's all the rest of this year and all of next year until November. So I don't think it's going to happen fast. I think this is the play out of justice is going to take some time. And it may take a special counsel or a special prosecutor. And then the third phase, which I think will occur right around the election, is that the American people are finally going to realize that the traitors at the heart of this conspiracy, this coup d'etat, were Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And I believe that the public is going to demand justice from both Clinton and Obama when they realize the extent and nature of the criminal plot that was launched against Donald Trump.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a major part of Donald Trump's reelection campaign, is the fact that this coup d'etat was launched and is continuing. And the deep state now has radicalized the Democratic Party until where it's becoming an openly socialist, anti-American party.
Yeah.
Such that all of the candidates are expressing this anti-American socialism. And that's, I think, an extension of the coup d'etat. Because really what they want to do is overthrow the United States itself and the Constitution.
And, Doctor, that's a plan that's existed among the communist community within the United States for many years. You've spoken about it for years. Diana West has spoken about it. A lot of people thought that was a conspiracy theory, but now if a Democratic candidate doesn't support socialism, they're like out of the running.
Well, I want to reference some of the things. I don't, mean to be just promoting the things I've written, but I want to reference them so you know that they're there. And it's I wrote an ebook and an audiobook. It was called Dr. Corsi Investigates, and it's why the Democratic Party has gone communist. It's right there. And I especially recommend that you get the audio version of that one. The audio version, also iTunes, because it's 9.5 hours, and I explain that the Communist Party decided in the 1950s, that it would take over the United States, not by a communist revolution. The Marx idea of the workers of the world uprising never really happened anywhere, that it didn't work.
Yeah.
But the idea that if the communists took over the Democratic Party, Italian communist theorist Gramsci had laid out the plan where you take over a nation incrementally. You do it by eroding the fundamental values, family, God, and to turn the population on this issue of social justice, racism, and the like against the Constitution. And the communists decided that they were going to take over the Democratic Party in order to achieve this goal. Now, that's, I think, the audio version of that, especially it takes 9.5 hours, but I think you'll find that it's very thorough because I go through all of this history, including the McCarthy era and what's going on today with Antifa, Black Lives Matter. And this is all part of the same motivation of the group in the deep state, in the CIA, in the FBI, the Department of Justice. These were all Hillary Clinton supporters who looked forward to the fundamental transformation of America that Barack Obama promised in 2007 and 2008 when he was running for president, that Hillary Clinton, with her 8 years, was supposed to finish. And that transformation would have been transforming the United States from a constitutional republic into a communist state, to a socialist state first, and then lying that it had any Marxist or communist ambitions. Saul Alinsky, who I think was the architect of this strategy in the United States. Barack Obama worked in a Saul Alinsky organization in Chicago when he was a young man. Hillary Clinton did her thesis in college on Saul Alinsky. She spent time with him in Chicago and actually became a Saul Alinsky communist supporter in her college years. And so, there's Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, who were the two Weather Underground bombers. Bill Ayers supported Barack Obama's rise in Chicago, into Chicago politics. And he himself is a Marxist. I met and interviewed Bill Ayers.
Oh, wow.
And he went the route of education. He decided that he was going to go into education in order to transform the next generation into socialists through the universities.
Corsi, let me ask you about that because, I was a very young boy when all this was happening with the Weather Underground. I didn't really know anything about it until very recently, and I think that's the way they want it to be. I think there's a lot of people who don't know anything at all about the Weather Underground, and concurrent with my learning about them, I also found out about this article that appeared in the New York Times on September 11th, 2001. Now, it's important for people to realize that the attacks of September 11th, 2001 happened at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So obviously, Danita Smith must have written this article prior to the attacks, and the headline is "No Regrets for a Love of Explosives." In a memoir of sorts, a war protester talks of his life with the Weathermen, and it opens with a quote from Bill Ayers saying, "I don't regret setting bombs. I feel we didn't do enough. And I have heard this audio tape manifesto from Bernadine Dorn where she says, guard your universities, guard your airplanes, guard your banks. And when I think about the targets on September 11th, 2001, Doctor, I can't help but think that, of course, airplanes were ostensibly used. The World Trade Center was a target. It's filled with banks. It was filled with police officers. The Weather Underground bombed the NYPD. They bombed the Pentagon. They bombed the Capitol building. Of course, the Pentagon was a target on 9/11. Doctor, is there any possibility that this subversion of the government and the university structure was a Weather Underground plan to execute 9/11?
Well, I scrolled down a little bit more in that article. I believe this was a book review of his book. The book had been just published, Fugitive Days by Ayers, and he was describing his days in the Weather Underground and how he went underground and hid for years. He wasn't found for years. Then he surfaced and was prosecuted, and he was actually, the case was thrown out of court because of improprieties that the government had used in doing its investigation. At any rate, I think that the Weather Underground was clearly one of the revolutionary socialist communist movements in the late 60s and 70s, and Ayers was clearly in the vanguard of the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, and it was they morphed into the very radical arm, the Weather Underground, and that, Weather Underground was from one of the Bob Dylan songs. It takes a weatherman, Okay, so the separately, I believe David Horowitz has done some very good work on this in his book Dark Alliance. In the same period of time, in the late 70s, with Ayatollah Khomeini, the radical Islamic movements that were revolutionary, were jihadist, were also Dark Alliance and David Horowitz. Horowitz. They formed an alliance. The hardcore. There's
Unholy
the book right there.
Alliance. There we go.
Unholy Alliance. Unholy Alliance. Yeah, not dark. Unholy Alliance. This is about the fact that radical Islam in the American left in the 70s, Ayatollah Khomeini, the Marxists had penetrated radical Islam, and their ideology became revolutionary, and they were out to liberate the world for Islam. And at the same time, the American left, which was socialistic or Marxist, wanted to create a revolution in America in order to eliminate the capitalist state. They both had the same ultimate end goal, which was the destruction of the United States, the destruction of capitalism. They wanted to go in different directions. The Weather Underground wanted a socialist or a communist state, and the radical Islamists, the terrorists, wanted a Islamic state worldwide, but yet they both hated the United States, and they joined forces on that. So I think the fact that this article was published in the New York Times on then Ayers' new book, which came out in 2001, this Fugitive Days, was coincidence. I don't see that there was any coordination or planning between the two, but it is a very interesting coincidence.
Oh boy!
And it's really one of those things that makes you say I'm sure that they would have picked a different day to publish this book review had they known what 9/11 was turning into that day.
Yeah, well, and it's a very appropriate topic for our conversation today, Doctor, because we're talking about indictments. We're talking about prosecutorial impropriety that was utilized in an attempt to strong-arm you into accepting a plea deal for a crime that you did not do. And here we have a case where Bill Ayers not only admits that he participated in the bombings of the New York City Police Headquarters, the Capitol Building, and the Pentagon. This is a case where they failed to indict the guy, again, because of prosecutorial impropriety.
Well, They did indict him. It was a long
Sorry,
story, but the
but
case
they
was
didn't
thrown out.
incarcerate
They didn't
him.
they didn't convict him.
Right.
Okay. Now the point is, I think this is one of the. I'd like to draw a different point from this
Sure.
discussion as well, and that is that I think it's one of the reasons Barr is going so carefully. Is that, and I'm hoping that Barr will have indictments in this next report. As I said, I'm going to hold it to the fact that there's got to be a statement here that from Barr in this next report that's due any day now, that the FISA court applications were illegal. Because I think they're trying to be fair. There's when he was in the Bush administration, George H.W. Bush, as a younger man, obviously, and he is an establishment player in Washington. Question's going to be how true to his oath is he going to be to do his job. Now, and kind of shifting gears to where the ultimate question of this got asked today about the indictments, is that I want to explain to you why I'm pretty convinced that, well, I'm absolutely sure that that you had a case of illegality in these FISA applications. It was because they were largely based on the Steele dossier.
Right.
And when you investigate this, Citizens United produced a series of memos, documents that came from a woman named Kavalac, Kavalac, in the State Department. As my book will show, coup d'etat, that Steele had been working with the State Department. Christopher Steele, who's the British former intelligence agency, was hired by Fusion GPS, that's Glenn Simpson, former Wall Street Journal reporter, to do opposition research. And Fusion GPS was funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign and by the Democratic National Committee. They laundered the money through Perkins Coie, the law firm, so that it wouldn't show up that Hillary was paying for the opposition research. And then Steele got the research into the FBI. He was bringing it in through the State Department as well to give it credibility. And this woman, Kavalac, Kavalac, in memos that we now have because of Citizens United, and I think if you look at that, the Hills argument there, the first one, that first article would be very good. That's who she is. But go back, and they just click on that. That's a John Solomon article. And he had clearly gotten to the heart of this Kavalac memo, because Kavalac wrote, she had a meeting 1 week before Comey took the Steele dossier to the FISA court to get electronic surveillance on Carter Page.
Right.
That occurred, this is a time period around July, August 2016. And meeting with Christopher Steele 1 week before the FISA application was submitted by Comey and others, approved by Loretta Lynch, Kavalac says that Steele can't validate this memo and that he was paid his opposition research. And she's trying to alert the FBI not to rely on the memo. Now, the fact that the FBI ignored Kavalac's memo and did not tell the FISA court that, in fact, the Steele dossier was opposition research and that there were serious reservations about its accuracy. Instead, the FISA applications out of the top verified when the FBI and Department of Justice submitted it to the FISA court. It said verified at the top. Okay, now that's a crime, because you can't misrepresent to the FISA court key evidence on which you're making an application to do electronic surveillance on a U.S. citizen. You see, the FISA court exists because under U.S. law, the federal government is not supposed to conduct electronic surveillance of U.S. citizens unless there's reason to believe that the citizen is working with a foreign national, someone from another country, to spy on the United States or create a national security emergency. Right. That's why the investigation became, in the FBI, a counterintelligence investigation. It was no longer a criminal investigation. It was a counterintelligence investigation. Okay, and by having these 4 applications to do electronic surveillance on Carter Page, which extended all the way until the first year of the Trump presidency. And Carter Page was, and had been for decades, a FBI and CIA informant. Okay, yet they used him as the target of this FISA application because he had been to an international conference in London, and Christopher Steele alleged this on the Trump dossier that Carter Page had met with the Russians. Carter Page had been appointed an economic advisor to the Trump campaign, and this was the collusion link, where they thought if they could electronically surveil Carter Page, they would get conversations incriminating him, colluding with the Russians on behalf of the Trump campaign. And it extended not only to do electronic surveillance on Carter Page, but on everybody Carter Page was talking to as collateral, including all the officials in the Trump campaign that Carter Page was in touch with, and all the people they were in touch with could now be under electronic surveillance because of this FISA court application, which is something that is not supposed to be easily granted because U.S. citizens are not supposed to be under electronic surveillance. So I think Comey, Loretta Lynch, and others committed crimes in using this Steele dossier they knew to be criminal, they knew to be incorrect, knew to be a fabrication, and paid for by the Clintons, opposition research. They did not tell that to the FISA court. The FISA court granted permission to do electronic surveillance based on the representations of the FBI that the claims within the Steele dossier had been verified, which they had not been. Now, do you follow what I'm saying, Jason? That's a little bit complicated, but I think it should be clear if you follow through the thread of the logic.
I do follow, Doctor. My concern, of course, is that it doesn't seem to bother any of these guys to get involved in doing stuff that is illegal or defies procedure. And, we're talking a lot about whether or not the Attorney General will indict, and it can't get past this burning feeling that he is a deep stater through and through. He was pivotally involved in these pardons related to the Iran-Contra scandal. And of course, viewers of Crowdsource the Truth and fans of Corsi Nation are very well aware that Bill Clinton played a key role in this that's never been officially acknowledged, but as the governor of Arkansas, the drugs from Iran-Contra coming into Mena, Arkansas, I think a lot of people have the valid concern that William Barr is still goaltending for this highly criminal operation, one of the worst in the history of the country.
Well, if you listen very carefully to what I'm saying that the jury is out on Barr.
Right.
And the litmus test is going to be the next report.
Right.
In which I'm going to be demanding that Barr recommends indictment, criminal investigation for those involved with the FISA court application.
Right.
If Barr, and all these criminals have an excuse. Comey will say that he didn't intend to deceive the court.
Yeah.
That he believed or had reason to believe that these claims were legitimate because Christopher Steele had a history with the FBI of doing investigations, including on the scandals in world soccer, where there were bribes being given out to get a certain city selected as the next city for the World Cups. And Christopher Steele did some credible investigative research during that was useful to the FBI. And so Comey's going to say, well, he had a history with us, so we relied on what he said as being accurate. Well, that's not good enough, because the Cadillac memo from the State Department shows that they were warned that in this case, Steele was making it up. He was fabricating. And that this time the research was paid for as opposition research by the Clintons.
It's funny, Doctor.
Now,
they love these FISA, any scandal with 4 letters that starts with an F, they're all over it.
Well, that's an interesting observation, but the point is, I don't want to have to get into unwrapping the Iran-Contra.
Sure.
And I don't disagree with what you said, but the point is that that, again, is another very, very complicated issue, and there were deep state actors involved in that, and Barr may have played a deep state role there, like you're suggesting. I don't want to judge the one by the other, but I'm saying that given these suspicions about Barr, and given the fact that Horowitz has not yet done anything that resulted in a prosecution, even McCabe is not yet indicted.
Yeah.
And with McCabe, who Horowitz's earlier report carved out a report on McCabe, made it crystal clear that McCabe lied to the FBI about leaking information to the newspapers, and in fact, McCabe was fired the day before his pension was, going to be fully vested.
Right.
Course, by the way, McCabe did get his pension ultimately, but at any rate, oh yes, they always, this again, the deep state taking care of its own.
Well,
now the question is whether
he also got over $500,000 from a GoFundMe campaign, which seems
correct.
Remarkably, like, raising money is difficult. For somebody to get $500,000 from GoFundMe, it just reeks of anonymous payments that could have come from anybody.
Well, on the left, when they want to get these people with GoFundMe, suddenly their accounts have $500,000 in it over and over again. When we want to raise money as conservatives or Christians, it's always hard.
Right.
I raised money for my legal defense. I've raised money subsequently for, our support, and also to get me back to advance my work. If you look carefully on Corsi Nation, the fund now is really for a support fund. If you click that donate, you'll see that we've changed the name of the fund from Legal Defense so that people know they are contributing to the work I'm doing.
Oh, doctor, something's wrong with the page.
It is. Not necessarily. Go back again. Maybe there is. But it's lower down on the left-hand margin of the page. You'll see the links. I'll have to check and see if that. Go down a little bit further. And a little further. It should be there. There, right there, the donate. And all of those are now couched as basically contributing to the CorsiNation.com and contributing to the work I'm doing. We redefined them away from legal defense, but we didn't raise $500,000 like McCabe did. I mean, the deep state takes care of its own. It's one of the real concerns. This is the big hurdle at this moment that's facing the nation, and that is whether or not Horowitz and Barr will do their job, whether they'll be honest when crimes have been committed of identifying the crimes.
Right.
And this will, if the FISA court application, which was at the core of the conspiracy, is deemed illegal, and there are criminal prosecutions coming out of it, that will officially begin the second phase of what I've predicted is going to happen, namely the Trump counterattack. Because now all of these criminals who are associated with it extends, I think, even up into Mueller and Weissman, who engaged, I believe, in prosecutorial misconduct in order to try to prove their case of Russian collusion, which they could not do. This will all unravel, but it's going to take somebody to be indicted, and that's going to take the courage of Horowitz to report it, and the courage of this I guess U.S. Attorney Durham, to do the grand jury work on this, to produce an indictment, and of Barr to approve the indictment. And while I would like to use the test as being McCabe, and I'm watching that case very closely, I think that when I've seen this progression of reports from Horowitz, and I think he's building to the big drum roll, which will be the next report. If I'm wrong, then I'm going to conclude that once again, you've got a deep state actor in William Barr.
Yeah. Well, I've created this little...
McCabe really deserves to be indicted. And
yes.
And I've created this... is very, very clear.
I've created this graphic to sort of illustrate that, Doctor, but I made this quite a while ago, and there's been no activity whatsoever that would seem to indicate that Andrew McCabe, I mean, he's violated many statutes. There should be no barrier to indicting him, but we'll have to see what happens.
Well, all of these things I think we're going to now have a chance to put to hard tests. Up to this point, we haven't been able to say finally that the cover-up is continuing and the cover-up is not going to ever be penetrated with indictments. But I've been right so far in saying that Mueller would fail. And I knew firsthand how Mueller operated, and I knew that they were not honest. I told them over and over again that I did not have contact with Julian Assange, but yet they were so determined that I was going to be the link between Assange and Roger Stone, which would have been their connection back to Donald Trump as to how to get the emails that were in the possession of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks published to hurt Hillary the most. Well, in July and August 2016, when I had my 25th wedding anniversary, I've said this repeatedly, we took a trip to Italy, and I figured out, I had time, I figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails. That was in July 2016, and they weren't published until October 2016. And I had no way to know for sure that I was right, but I told Roger Stone, I told others, I was convinced I was right, and in fact I was right.
Yeah.
But, these Mueller prosecutors, if you read my book, Silent No More, you'll see the agony they put me through because they were convinced I had to be lying, that I had a connection with Julian Assange I didn't want to disclose, which was not the case.
Noting, Doctor, that they also haven't done anything to indict Podesta.
No, Podesta's not been investigated.
It's amazing.
You see, this is another. I think the only thing that's under investigation right now is the FISA court application. That's the whole focus of Horowitz's next report. I mean, I point out, I think there's a lot more crimes that were committed along the way by this deep state in advancing this conspiracy. And I do think this conspiracy was aimed at making sure Donald Trump would never be president.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing that Podesta hasn't been investigated. All those weird emails about pizza with cheese and pasta and just the financial aspects of what the Podesta brothers have done relative to the Clinton Foundation. And Doctor, it comes back to the core argument that Charles Ortel has been pursuing for years, that you and he have worked on. The Clinton Foundation also not being investigated as quickly as we would like it to be.
And also excused. There have been grand juries, there have been criminal investigations on the FBI. They've all been excused.
Right.
And, if you put me back on the screen for just 1 minute, I want to make another point or two that I want really people to emphasize on.
Sure.
To get me back on the screen looking at people. And my camera's still been a little bit funky today, going on and off. I'll have to see what's going on with that.
We've got you, Doctor.
But the point I want to make is I want to make twofold points. One is that crimes were committed. You talk about Podesta. The WikiLeaks emails show Podesta got this stock in Jolie, which are Joule, however you pronounce it, a Netherlands front company that was set up by the Russians, and in transactions with Podesta, he gets stock, which he then tries to hide by giving to his daughter and reassigning them. She's in financial services in Southern California, so he tries to reassign them. That's in those emails. That's not investigated. The reset, which both Podesta and Hillary were using to basically sell military technology, I believe, to Russia, including, I think, this supersonic this technology. And by the way, Peter Schweitzer in Accountability Institute has done excellent work on this. His report from Russia with Money was one of the ones that opened my eyes to this scandal. Of course, I've been investigating the Uranium One scandal, which I think is one of the keys to unlocking the entire corruption of the Clinton Foundation. So Hillary Clinton's gotten a pass on all of this. And I'm hoping that we're kind of here now down to the last chance to get justice. And if you put me back on for a minute, so I want to look at people through the camera here.
You're
and
on,
say
Doctor.
that I think
you should.
Well, I'm looking. Okay, I was looking through the things you're scrolling. I want to make sure I'm in direct contact, because I want to say directly, that Barr has got to do his job, and I want honesty here. I want the truth brought out that we know to be the truth. Now, we'll settle for the FISA court applications were illegal, and the people who submitted them in the Department of Justice don't have a good excuse. All their excuses are alibis, made up lies. They're all attempts to say, we didn't intend to do this. Well, all those excuses have already been used over and over again for Hillary, for Comey, for the foundation, for Uranium One. They all intended to do what they did.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton, by creating an alternative email system outside the State Department, the law defines intent is defined by the act. She wouldn't have done it had she not intended to violate the State Department protocol for the handling of classified information. She was guilty by definition, and the law did not include an intent feature into it. In fact, it was written out of the law, the intent feature.
Right.
And Comey, when he, in July 2016, decided to excuse Hillary Clinton, was clearly a deep state operative. Now, Comey may not have gotten caught on his memos, but he is caught as a central player in the FISA court applications based on the Fusion GPS Christopher Steele dossier. And that's not going to be excused. That's going to have to be brought forward to the attention of the American people, or there's going to be uproar in the United States, and I'll be beating the drum one of the loudest.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? Because what's at stake here is whether or not these coup d'etat planners get away with a conspiracy to destroy the Constitution of the United States. And they're all identified. You look through Brennan, who voted for Gus Hall, a communist, in the 50s. All of these people, vast majority, Comey, who, if you really research his background, admits to being a communist as a young man. You're dealing with a whole group that are in the justice system, put in there by the Obama administration, who conducted this coup d'etat as a counterintelligence investigation. The counterintelligence investigation is conducted for the president. It's impossible that Obama didn't know exactly what was going on in the Justice Department, and that Hillary Clinton knew it as well. In fact, there's Lisa Page, Peter Strzok text messages in which Lisa Page makes it clear that Obama knows every single thing they're doing.
Right. And
is on top micromanaging what's going on in this Russia collusion investigation. Okay, now, I think this is the key, and it dropped out again, so you can go back to showing. It'll probably come back in a minute. I'll have to read. There we go. It's done that periodically. I don't know what's wrong with the camera. We'll have to figure that out. Mm-hmm. Maybe a cable or something that I have to readjust.
Sure.
At any rate, the point I'm making here is that we're at a critical moment where this next Horowitz report is going to determine whether there's anybody in the Department of Justice, including Barr, including Durham, including Horowitz himself, who has any sense of real justice, real honesty, knows what their oath was about, and will do the right thing. Otherwise, these people are all participating in the cover-up and will implicate themselves ultimately if we need a special prosecutor to get to the bottom of this, because unlike the Russian collusion, it is demonstrable that these people committed crimes in their attempt to deny Donald Trump the election on this Russian collusion hoax and to remove him from office after he was elected and after the inauguration on the basis of that he was a traitor, a spy, an asset of Russia, which is just nonsense.
Yeah. I think, Doctor, you said something very meaningful that stuck with me, that this is the last chance for justice. I think a lot of people here in our comments today, and frequent viewers and listeners of Crowdsource the Truth and Corsi Nation, are concerned that if as you've suggested, we get this final report about the FISA stuff from Barr and he doesn't indict anybody, it's going to be too late?
Well, my intuition, and as I say, it's like when I figured out in July and August that Podesta had, I'm sorry, that Assange had Podesta's emails. I didn't have any reason to know that. When I wrote Killing the Deep State, it really, I was clear that there would be these three phases. And I was certain that Mueller would fail. Well, he did fail. This was in 2017 when I wrote that book, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was absolutely confident that in the second phase that we're going through right now, that there would be a Trump counterattack and that we would get to the truth. Now, I believe that prayer is central to this. And if you'll go to Corsi Nation and take a look at the prayer section at the top, together with one of the people working on the prayer warriors with us, Arthur Thum, we've written a prayer that is asking God to make sure that justice will be done. Now, I think this is part of, God will get involved, and I believe God intervenes in history, and God will, but God's going to wait for us to do something.
Right.
And what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to put out to the alert. You'll see at the very top bar the prayer. There it is, prayer for the prosecution of the deep state. I'd like people to go to Corsi Nation and look at that prayer, and say that prayer and pass it around. Prayer warriors are now in the process of making sure that prayer gets widely distributed. And it calls for the justice to be done. If the Constitution is going to be preserved, we're going to save this nation from a massive assault, because the deep state criminals, the traitors, the people who want the fundamental change of the United States into a socialist state, are within the justice system and are within the CIA, and they intend to remain there unless they're exposed and brought to justice. And the key test is coming up. This next Horowitz report is going to be central to determining whether we're going to have justice or whether we need a special prosecutor, whether we cannot rely upon these bureaucracies to police themselves.
Yeah.
And, my last hope is that Horowitz, Barr, and Durham will see, Comey claims he has a higher loyalty. Well, your higher loyalty ought to be to God and the Constitution, not to some idea you have that a socialist state would be better and that you, James Comey, can determine that the president's a traitor, so you're going to frame him, use a lying dossier to do electronic surveillance on American citizens. That's just unacceptable. It's not only unacceptable, it's criminal.
Yeah.
It's not only criminal, it's a treason. And my instinct is that we will have prosecutions and that the justice will be served. But I'm urging people to get involved, to pray, to inform themselves of what's going on, to do what you can to catch up on these things and to read and to listen to these kinds of podcasts. Make sure that this is widely distributed, because I think we're at a critical point, and within the next few days and weeks, we're going to know whether or not the Trump counterattack is going to be allowed to occur through Horowitz, Barr, and Durham. And a lot of people whom I know and respect are still telling me that they think Barr and Durham and Horowitz will do their job and will be honest. I'm waiting to see, because you pointed out, going back to Iran-Contra, and Barr is a deep state agent for a long time, he's capable of covering up too. And so I'm going to trust where he is by how this next Horowitz report on FISA court abuse comes out.
Well, Doctor, I certainly hope you're correct. I know everyone watching does, and we have no choice but to wait and see what occurs. There's been no real deadline given as to when this report will arrive, has there? It's just sometime soon.
Sometime soon. I think that Hannity has been very much on the mark about when these reports are coming out. Joe DeGenova, one of the attorneys in Washington, a former part of the justice system itself, one of the U.S. attorneys, or within the U.S. attorney system, have said that the Horowitz report on FISA abuse is done and was submitted to Barr, and was going to be released after Labor Day. So I'm expecting it could be released any day.
Right.
And Hannity has just been he's had very good sources, and he's been a very good predictor of this. So we'll have to see if, in fact, we can, get a definitive result here and find out exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I guess.
But the point is, if we get the report the way I think it's going to come, then it'll go from Horowitz to Durham to do grand jury work on, if it hasn't already been started. It will lead to indictments which Barr will approve. All three have to be involved. All three have a role. And the deep state will fight desperately. I mean, even with regards to McCabe's case,
right.
They've got a lawyer in there, a woman named Liu, L-I-U, who, has been deep state and participated in General Flynn and the rest. I'm, by the way, very pleased to see Sidney Powell as a lawyer on General Flynn's case.
Yeah.
And I think she's got an excellent chance of getting that case thrown out of court, because I'm confident that Weissman, the attorney, the crooked attorney who was working with Mueller, withheld exonerating information that would exonerate General Flynn, because that's Weissman's style, going back to the Enron case that Sidney Powell revealed in her book License to Lie. She's an excellent attorney, and I hope General Flynn gets justice. I think he was pressured into pleading to a crime he didn't commit.
Yep.
And I think he has a chance yet to be exonerated.
Yeah, and Doctor,
but the point is,
your work in revealing the tactics, I think, has been extremely important in opening the public's eyes to the fact that this is what's going on. And I agree with you. It seems quite clear that similar, if not the exact same tactics, were employed by similar, if not the exact same people against General Flynn. I've spoken to some members of his family as to why they would have selected Covington and Burling to be their attorneys, and they simply said it was a mistake. I think we can assume that General Flynn is a military strategist and an expert in that field, but maybe doesn't know that much about law firms in Washington, D.C. So I share your satisfaction with the new counsel representing General Flynn. I think that Sidney Powell is a really excellent lawyer, powerful woman, and just the right person for the job, who's now coming out strong with a good offense, saying that the prosecutors withheld exculpatory information. We know that Judge Emmett Sullivan has a standing order regarding prosecutorial revelation of Brady material, and he has a very short temper for prosecutors that misbehave and engage in prosecutorial misconduct by not revealing this information, which is required of them by law. And I think it's an important learning lesson for everyone to see how this goes down and what they really need to look out for. Doctor, we're almost out of time. So
one second.
Yeah,
I want to make one more comment. The last point is that I agree with everything you said. I think my case, and I try to explain this in Silent No More, my case, I think, was the end of Mueller.
I agree.
Because I was the first one, I believe, to tell Mueller, take a hike. You want to put me in jail for the rest of my life? Go ahead.
Yeah.
And when Rudy Giuliani, when Jay Sekulow and the others got involved, and I think understood what the prosecutors were trying to do with me, Mueller really came to an end.
Yes.
I think my case, the timing between my telling Mueller to take a hike, their decision not to indict me, and the shutting down, the appointment of Barr and the shutting down of Mueller's operation, I don't think were coincidental. I think my case was the end point, and when resisting Mueller, I think, brought an end to Mueller. Now, I think also that if we put Barr on the line here and say the Barr and Horowitz and to Durham, this is the litmus test. Let's see this FISA court abuse, and it better say these were illegally obtained, because they were, and we know it, and we can prove it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so don't be part of the cover-up. That's the message today. And the deep state is awake, which I expect it is, and listening, which I expect they are. We intend to deliver this message to the American people. There's my funky camera again going out. It'll come back. or I'll snap it back. There we go. And it adds a little a dimension of deep state drama to the broadcast. So at any rate, you were going to wrap up, and I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And Doctor, I thoroughly agree with what you've said. I think that your challenge to Robert Mueller, it's what I always say, you know, the bully on the school bus bullies everybody until the one person stands up and punches him in the nose and lets him know we're not going to be bullied by you. And that reveals the paper tiger. I think we should also thank our mutual friend Larry Klayman, who was pivotal in that victory. And
David Gray. I mean, I did not get a Covington and Burley. I did not get a Washington law firm because I was convinced they'd be in bed with the government and the prosecutors.
Absolutely.
David Gray and Larry Klayman did a magnificent job. And it was now time to duke it out with Barr and Horowitz and Durham because they won't do their jobs. We'll then bring that on. We'll duke it out with those guys.
And Doctor, before we go, I want to remind our viewers today that this has been a special presentation of Dr. Corsi's.
And when I say that, let me qualify. I'm saying duke it out in a verbal sense. I'm not saying we're going to
in the courtroom in a legal sense.
In the courtroom in a gentlemanly fashion, but we're going to verbally duke it out in a way that we're going to call them for being deep state co-conspirators if they don't do their jobs. And I expect this next report on the FISA court abuses to recommend prosecutions, and I expect those recommendations to be followed through with indictments.
Yes. And I, like you, Doctor, will be very disappointed if those expectations are not met. I want to remind our viewers that today's presentation of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America has been a very special one. We've opened up this subscription-only show on the first broadcast of the month for everyone to watch on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope, on DLive, on VK.com. We're simulcasting on Dr. Corsi's YouTube channel, and just in the last few minutes of the broadcast here, if people want to go over there, they can send super chat payments to Dr. Corsi directly on his own YouTube channel. Our viewers can also support Dr. Corsi by visiting CorsiNation.com. That's Dr. Corsi's free webpage that everybody can visit. He's got the Prayer Warrior section under the Faith tab right there. And of course, you can contribute to Dr. Corsi's financial success by tapping the donate link there. I want to remind everyone that they can see every episode of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America by getting onto patreon.com/Jerome Corsi and becoming a sponsor. The show is always simulcast on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. People can see us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me again today. It's always intriguing to hear your insights, and we'll be back next week on Patreon and Subscribestar.
Thanks, Jason. God bless you, and God bless all the listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, and thanks everyone for watching. Stay tuned. We've got a special episode of the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp coming up at 7 o'clock. Tonight, our guest is Lee Stranahan. He's going to be talking all about Bill Browder and the curious development where Devin Nunes is now defending Bill Browder. Don't miss that show, 7 p.m. right here. Thanks for watching, everybody.